Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another onslaught of mispronounced words and names to share with you guys. This is the Bestech Razon. I'm kidding, it's the Razon. I honestly don't know. It's a knife designed by our friend Combo. I keep forgetting, and I'm terrible about that. But seriously, though, he is one of Bestech's best, in terms of who they collaborate with. He's definitely one of their best designers. There's a lot of effort that's put into his knives, and I always get really excited to take a look at his work. This is definitely a Navaja. I definitely mispronounced that. I'm so sorry. Inspired knife or Spanish knife. I think that's legitimately the word in Spanish for pocket knife. I think, holy moly, the number of corrections that will be in the comments will definitely be a spectacle. So jump on down there. I'm sure it's a good time. Thanks so much to Bestech for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. This knife is available. It comes in a few different configurations. I'll link it down in the description. You can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. It's actually pretty big at 8.5 inches, big boy for sure. 3.85 inches by my measurement in terms of blade length, and also 3.85, just shy. It's 3.8 inches of cutting edge. How about some size comparisons? Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the 80-10 and the 80-20.5, you can see here, it is legitimately as long as the 80-10. It's just nowhere near as robust. Does come close in terms of blade height, though. Way longer than something like the 80-20.5. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Definitely longer than both. Definitely way more cutting edge than both. And somehow more handle? That's interesting. I mean, they have an extra a quarter inch to work with, but it's funny how we ended up here. We've got a lot of room on the handle and just substantially more cutting edge. Strange ratios, I guess, when specifically compared to the PM2 and Para 3. And then finally, up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. And where are you at? The Hogue Deca. How is the action on this knife? Boy, it is spectacular. There's a little bit of a stop right there. Right there. Access to the lock bar if you like to, do the two-handed thing, which can be a little risky depending on the design. But this flat area right here, if you are releasing the lock bar right at the top, will drop right to your finger, and the rest of it is fall shut. You have a huge, looks like a monster truck tire on the top of this thing, and it is definitely in the cutting path. I've said many times, I used to have a personal vendetta against these things, these little thumb discs. I hated them. I did not care about the tactical deployment, right? I wasn't fighting off terrorist clowns that were jumping off of buildings and, swooping in on me while I walked through dark alleyways. So I didn't need the tactical deployment. Pull it out of your pocket, have it catch the lip of your pocket and deploy. No, I don't need any of that, right? That's not my everyday. I also did not like the positioning on a lot of them, and looking back, I realized that a lot of the knives that I handled was probably a combination of me not being comfortable with this type of system, and partially some bad placement and probably some improperly tuned detents on specifically the models that I was looking at years ago. But now that that's not really a thing anymore, like pretty much every company has this figured out. The placement of this is actually very good. Make no mistake, it is in the way in a bunch of different ways. Like, that's a bad example there. You can absolutely conveniently flick this out, but it's definitely huge. It might catch your pocket, in and out, in ways that you don't want it to, and it is well into the cutting path. But in terms of deployment, it's actually a pretty cozy way to do that, honestly. Get your fingernail underneath there. If you're like me, you like to use the meat of your finger, you can do that too. You can, of course, well, you have to kind of stay off the lock bar, which is a little hard. You got a cat's paw, right? You can wheel it out, right? Or you can thumb flick it out. It works really, really well. It's actually in a really great spot. I wish it was adjustable. That would be really cool, right? But that would require sort of a sliding, you'd have like a little grabby things, and you'd have to have a little fuller right here, which might be kind of a gunk trap. But in terms of deployment, isolated, right? We're talking just about deployment. It's very good. It's incredibly smooth. I mean, look at that. Really nice. Really, really nice. So detent's nice too. Action is good. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So the thickness of the knife up against the Spyderco Para 3 is actually a little on the thick side, little bit. Do we have subtle contouring? We actually do. Very subtle. It is not perfectly flat, but it might as well be. I mean, it feels pretty flat. It's a little, you can feel a little bit of curvature, not much, right? Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is, you know, what I often refer to as a tactical banana. It does have that curvature. Sometimes that can work out and sometimes not. Honestly, I didn't notice a whole lot of difference between this and some other knives in the pocket. I was really focused on the thumb disc in and out and deploying it, right? It will deploy, but there were some situations where I was like, yeah, that's just really kind of in the way, right? So that's more so than the shape of the knife in your pocket. That's probably what you're going to notice. It really depends on the type of pants you like to wear, right? So I guess in terms of jeans, I didn't notice much of a difference there between this and the other normal pocket knives that I regularly carry. It does get fairly tall, not quite as tall as the hump on the PM2 and Para 3. It is longer than the Para 3 and I think pretty much identical. It's actually slightly longer than the Spyderco PM2. Materials. We are looking at, unless there's some other versions I'm not aware of, MagnaCut. I think it says right there in cursive. Wow, what a nice touch. It is nice. I don't know why I think it's funny when they, you know, because so many companies just like, it's like Times New Roman, you know. They're just like, yeah, it's MagnaCut, right? But this says MagnaCut in cursive, so that's nice. We have titanium, and then we have, I believe this is a PVD coating here. So, and then a titanium pocket clip and backspacer. So that's good. That's what it should have for the price. Weight on this guy. The weight is coming in at, and there's plenty of weight reduction, 4.1 ounces. Honestly, not bad for a 3.85 inch blade. I know people are already typing because they think I missed it or they just want to know, right? What's the HRC on the MagnaCut? Unfortunately, they have it a little low. Now, I got to point this out, right? If you are parroting, if you are being a parrot, I heard that the appropriate age rate is 63 to 64. So if it is not 63 to 64, I will be upset in the comment section. If you're doing that, close your beak, okay? Let's remember, number one, I also agree that it is slightly low. Now, initially, I was defending this, right? And the reason is because I went to Laren Thomas. You don't know who Laren Thomas is a person who developed MagnaCut, right? Now, I am not a metallurgist. I am not a professional of anything. But I will go and read, right? I will watch testing videos, right, and kind of decide for myself. So steel will have a range. Composition, like steel composition, will have an appropriate range. Now, there's a lot of how a blade will perform will depend on many, many factors. Factors that parrots will not care to consider at all, which is why we're dismissing the parrots, because it's just, that's just noise, right? But factors that will affect performance will include 100% environment, right? Whether or not you have, you know, are planning on like using the knife in terms of like an abusive way or anything like that. But assuming you're going to use the knife appropriately, you're going to cut the appropriate type of materials with a blade, right? You'll also have to consider the geometry, right? If you get something that's massively thick, well, a lot of the, you know, the blade steel composition and the heat treat kind of goes out the window when you have something that's just overly thick. This is all within the realm of like proper cutting geometry. It's like, you know, normal, you know, parameters, right? So we consider the blade steel MagnaCut, which is supposed to be an incredible balance of corrosion resistance. Is excellent in that department. In terms of like super steels in general, right? Corrosion resistance off the charts, right? It's up there with Vanax. Your toughness is also incredible considering the other attributes of MagnaCut, right? And then you have edge retention, which he somehow managed, you know, when properly heat treated, to get into an amazing zone. It is, in a lot of ways, it is similar to Van Axe, but I think the overall balance of this steel is slightly better when you consider all of those things, right? Now, the best, a lot of people would say the absolute peak, the optimal zone of this balance is 63-64. Laren Thomas has this huge range where he says the blade can perform really well anywhere from 60 to 64, maybe he says 61 to 64, and I think he's probably also considering a wide variety of geometries, you know, and he might also be considering, you know, knives that are fixed blades and folding knives. Obviously, I think for a fixed blade that you're going to do more abusive work with, maybe you wouldn't want it that hard. When we are talking about pocket knives at this, you know, blade geometry, this size, I would tend to agree, based on my very, very limited knowledge, without, you know, bending my arms and getting down, you know, like a parrot on a perch and just squawking at everybody. I would tend to agree with those people who like to say 63-64. Personally, 62-64 for me, I think is just fine. So when I see that their range is 60 to 62, it leaves me disappointed. Not in the way that 58 to 60 disappoints me with M390. And this is why I'm taking time to go out of my way and talk about this. I think that M390 hardened to 58 is, it might as well be a gum wrapper. You're not gaining the benefit of this steel. I mean, you're losing out on it entirely. It's supposed to be a good balance between specifically corrosion resistance and edge retention. So you're getting none of that. At 60 to 62, are you still getting the main idea behind the attributes of MagnaCut? Yes, but not, in my opinion, as potent as you would on a folding knife with this geometry in the 62, 63, 64 territory, specifically 63, 64 territory. So, if you plan on squawking, please, like, add context to it, right? I know I'm poking fun and I'm joking around here, but there needs to be more that goes into it, because the problem is that there are so many new people who will not take the time to learn about any of this, right? They want to automatically be indoctrinated into the depths of the knife. They just want to be like, this seems to be a popular thing to repeat, so I'm just going to repeat it so that I look like I know what's going on, right? A lot of people define my channel that way. I get fair blow, right? But yeah, like that's where I'm at on that. So am I a little disappointed? 60, 62? Yeah. Is it like, oh my God, you know, ground zero, apocalypse, like Bestech, the worst company in the world? No. Whoa, pump the brakes there, right? I would say what we should do here is say, hey, Bestech, you should probably get that up a little bit, because the vast majority of the community, especially the ones that you are marketing to, the people who are really going to pick this stuff up, are definitely going to complain about that, right? And I think that they are in the right, in my opinion. Bump it up a little bit. It shouldn't be that expensive, and the community will bless you for it. They will bless you. They will love it. So I think that's probably a good way to go. Anyways, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead, and we already weighed it. Let's get the blade stock thickness, since we're talking about geometry, right? The geometry is not thin enough to save it from that low heat treat. 149, 150 thousandths, right? I mean, if you know, you're talking 109, 110 thousandths, well, then that geometry in terms of cutting performance, right, might make up for that. But no, not in this case. That's fairly thick blade. So, but okay, it'll still cut, it'll still slice, right? It'll definitely have some wicked tough MagnaCut there at 60 to 62. But anyways, let's go ahead and do a hardware check. How about I get out my tools? As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them. Is this backwards? This is backwards. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. What's the pivot? It's almost certainly a T8. Yes, T8. And right there. And by the way, Mr. Kombu has nothing to do with that heat. Like, that's a Bestech heat treat, right? So don't come after him. That's 100% on Bestech. We have a T8 body screw over here, and most likely a pinned setup at the top unless they're only depending on this screw and the one screw it can't be because there's no screw on this side. Most likely another pin on the back of this backspacer you're holding it in, which is nice because it eliminates the necessity for 2 additional fasteners. So pocket clip screw holding in the pocket clip from the underside of the scale, which you might be able to see in there. And then a bunch of T8 hardware holding together a typical titanium frame lock running on bearings. That means that this knife will be incredibly easy to take apart and maintain. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. All right, meat and potatoes time. The way that this knife operates is really throwing me off from the fact that I honestly do not like the aesthetic of this at all. But as a design reviewer, I try to not focus on whether or not I just like how a knife looks, right? So many people are just like, I do not like how it looks, therefore it is bad. And that's stupid. That's a stupid way to look at that, right? Just because I don't like how the thing looks doesn't mean that it's not a good design, right? It obviously has influence from old school Spanish knife designs. And admittedly, I don't know if this heightened, this tall blade is specific to a certain type of Spanish knife. I always see the elongated, like the skinny ones, right? This sort of taper tail and like this kind of slight widening, and then it comes out to this, specifically this tip here, which is really interesting. This tip almost comes here and then starts to straighten out, making, oh boy, that is a that is a dangerously pointy tip. The knives that I believe that influenced this are even more so, right? Elongated, big old long things. Not familiar with that style of knife in general, but it's very obviously modeled after that. So does this work? Well, let's talk about the ergonomic lines of the frame here. Actually, the lock-in is pretty good, and as is usually the case with Combo's knives, everything is knocked down. Like, I mean, it's a combination of his designs and, you know, Bestech's ability to execute, and they did well. I mean, they always do, right? A lot of busyness here, but I feel like it's purposeful. I like that the sort of curved tapering holes here, this kind of like little, you know, it's like a baby hole. Well, that's a terrible way to, no, mama bear, papa bear, baby bear, and then the pivot. Oh God, I didn't think about what I was saying there. But yeah, it's like it follows this. This is cool. And it's got the 2 little bowls in here, and love it or hate it. I mean, it is kind of neat. It's very designy, right? You have the typical, you know, the extra chamfering lines. You have this area here, and then there's another shelf back here, and then another little spot that's milled out here, and it all sort of connects and goes into this chamfered area that ultimately leads to the spine. Same thing on the other side. Pocket clip also matches the design. Sort of the curvature sort of follows the cutout for the frame lock here. And I think the combination, like the scales are obviously more busy, fairly non-typical handle profile, but it does end up being ergonomic. Admittedly, it's really good. And there's some nice lock in here behind this button. So it's a very comfortable knife to hold for sure. It's very easy to manipulate, right? The blade there's nothing going on in terms of complexity. It's just the shape of the blade is very unique. I mean, the center part of the belly is literally, it's right here. It's not the same curvature throughout. It's just like kind of starts off and then aggressive, and then it goes up here, right, to this insane tip. A little swedge right there. In terms of slicing ability, yeah, I mean, I was only using it on plain things, cardboard and paper and tape and things like that. But yeah, it works really well. It'll get hung up on this, though. That's what's going to happen, especially if you're choked up and you're trying to push down. Even curved at an angle here, you might still run into it. So it is an area where it's going to get hung up almost an inch out if you cut straight down. Almost an inch out, 3/4 of an inch. There's that whole area there. So unless you are cutting at a hard angle right here, right, it's hard to put all that force into the initial edge. Little sharpening tool there. People will be happy with that. Outside of that, Bestech's ability to execute is definitely on point here. There are no fit and finish errors. This is definitely one of the smoother knives that I've handled, though for some reason, his designs in particular, they must translate with Bestech's machining processes. I don't know why, but his knives always feel better. Anybody else who's collected his stuff or picked his stuff up from Bestech, I bet you anything they say the same thing. I don't know what it is. His designs just feel better. And they are far and away some of the most interesting. Bestech has done a lot of good work, right? I'm not saying that everything else is boring. I'm saying when it's combo. And I know that it's either Kombu or Combo, and I'm really sorry. I always mess his name up. But his stuff is so interesting, even when I don't like the aesthetic, right? Even this, I looked at this, I was like, I know exactly who designed this knife, right? There's just a lot more effort here. There's a lot more knifey knife stuff here, right? So I do appreciate that. I respect that. We have no lanyard hole. Boo-hoo. Barely anybody cares anymore. We have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop, which is nice. We have a stop pin that is located in its traditional position here. Nice shouldering. Plenty of shouldering. No blade play up, down, left to right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent in here. And an appropriate detent. Honestly, a really nice detent. I'll give you guys a look at that here real quick. Oh, boy, that's good. Perfect centering, too, with no detent lash. So, not an aesthetic that I love, but that's not, I mean, you know, that's a personal preference, right? It's very subjective. Materials. What's the price, and does it make sense if we just reduce everything to materials, which we're not going to do because that's silly. $263. The knife is made in China. It's utilizing titanium and MagnaCut. It has subtle contouring, definitely some effort in the handle, PVD coating, MagnaCut, did I say that? Titanium pocket clip, definitely a little detail there. Titanium backspacer. Yeah, I think we're in the ballpark. This is obviously a super polarizing design. It was not a design that was meant for everybody, and it will not work out for everybody who's just looking for a straightforward, you know, EDC knife. This is going to be catered more towards people who specifically enjoy this Spanish aesthetic, or this traditional Spanish aesthetic, I guess. And for people who just like want to carry something a little bit more designy, but still carry a functional pocket knife, right? For me, the biggest thing here is like for the people who enjoy it, you're like, yeah, like if you don't enjoy this look, I mean, I don't know how you made it this far in the video, right? But if you do, I have to imagine if you're still here, you like how this looks, right? So yeah, materials, all that, we're on point. I think we're right in the right ballpark. Biggest thing though, Bestech, you got to bring that heat treat up. Like if you're going to use these steels, if we're going to use MagnaCut as like the billboard, like that is definitely the new M390. If you have not noticed, right? If you haven't been paying attention, MagnaCut is definitely the new hot girl on the block. That is 100% where we're at. And when it's heat treated properly and has, you know, depending on what you're doing with it, the appropriate geometry, man, it can perform. It's also not that difficult to touch up, even when it is higher up there at that 63, 64, right? This is what the people want. Give them what they want, right? Now, if you design a big, kind of a chunky fixed blade and you absolutely have to use MagnaCut, then okay, right? 60, 62, maybe so. But at this geometry, this type of knife, right? I'm not sure why it's so thick. Yeah, we got to be up there. So there you go. That's what I think. Either way, even at the higher numbers, I wouldn't say like everybody needs to rush out and get this. This is for a very specific audience. But if you like how this knife looks and you're not bothered by the hardness numbers there, which I got off of Bestech's website, then yeah, knock yourself out. It's really not a bad, you know, it's a premium knife, right? For everybody else, probably wait until you find something that tickles your fancy. That's going to be it today, guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.